What is real? How do you define real?
You can't jump into cash. Cash is trash. What do? You get out.
Clancy Rodgers, aka Anonymous BTB, hodling artist, truther, 3D printing, Second Amendment, trolling queen, Citadel 21 US, It's Bitcoin or Communism, author of What Happens When Walmart Buys $1 billion of Bitcoin, which was recently published in Bitcoin Magazine. Clancy Rodgers, welcome to the Bitcoin Matrix podcast. How are you?
Hey, Seth, I'm doing good. Thanks for having me.
Sure. What's up? It's great to have you here. How are things going by you?
Well, we are at the beach right now. We made it to Freedom Land. We made it to Florida. So we are happy to be out of our house because we were locked up there for 2 years. Felt like 2 years.
Sure. Well, I'd love to get into some of what's been going on over the last 2 years. But first, I want to hear a little bit more about you and how you got to Bitcoin and more about maybe, and we could even start with like your art and what your art means to you, what kind of art you're doing these days.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so how we got into Bitcoin, I can start with that.
Sure.
Well, my husband, Joe Rodgers, he actually just is super technical, and I mean, okay, let me just start with this. I'll just tell you the real story. So in 2013, we had our first child, and funny story. So he had just gotten this private cloud set up, and he was so proud of it. And we put all of our pictures on it. We put all our wedding pictures on it, and we just had our newborn, and we had all her pictures taken. And he put all those on there. And he was excited to go back home and be able to access them all. You know, it's just a little, project he had. So he left the ports open on our private cloud. So we were living in Texas, and we went back home to Arkansas, and he left it open so he could access it and show all of our friends and family all the pictures. And we get back home, and a couple of days later, he comes to me and he's like, okay, I got to tell you something, but you can't get mad at me. So of course I know, what the hell is he about to say? And I'm going to be mad, whatever he's going to, if he has to come to me like that. And so I'm like, okay, what is it? He said, so someone hacked our server, and we no longer have access to any of our pictures. And of course they weren't backed up. Nothing was backed up. And so I'm like, okay, I don't understand. They're just on the computer, right? He's like, no, I dumped them all into our cloud, and someone hacked it. And now they're saying that we have to pay them, or they won't give us our pictures back. And I'm like, well, what do you mean pay them? Like, how am I, like, I'm freaking out. My kid is like 2 weeks old. And he's like, well, they want us to pay them in Bitcoin. And I'm like, I don't know if I can cuss on here.
Yeah, you can.
Okay. I'm like, what the fuck is Bitcoin? And he's like, he's trying to explain to you, it's like a digital currency. It's like money. It's like internet money. And he already, had an idea of what it was, but he wasn't deep into it. And so I'm like, well, I don't give a shit how much it is. Like, these are our wedding photos. I'm hormonal. These are our newborn babies pictures. So I'm losing my mind. So he's like, okay. So he figures it out. He has to study and figure out how to like get on, get how to obtain Bitcoin. So he gets some. And so he ends up getting the pictures back, right? Because I'm losing my mind. And
Right.
I'm like, I don't care how much it is, just pay it.
Sure.
So that's 2013. And then, we like had some on an exchange and didn't really think about it anymore. And then 2017 market hit, and he's like, oh my God, babe, we have Bitcoin. Oh my God. He's like, I just had it left over. It was just sitting there, and we'd never done anything about it. And Joe has always been, hardcore libertarian. Like, he fucking hates the state, and he is, down that rabbit hole. So in 2017, he really, when the bull market hit, then he really dove deep into it. And then he like went and got like some miners and started getting into that. And I'm just like, yeah, whatever. It's, I wasn't interested. And I was going through like some really bad health issues. And so I like wasn't paying attention to it at all. then we had our other kid and everything. And then, but just gradually through the years, like I'm like more like a conspiracy theorist and all on that side of things. And I fucking hate the state too. So, just in a different way and from a different angle and different experiences. So that's literally how we got into Bitcoin, is because he left the ports open on our private cloud. And I was so fucking pissed. And thank God for the hackers, because that's why we were, holding Bitcoin. And that's why he looked into it, because he was like, oh God, the price was pumping. He was like, what am I doing with all this? So he actually got into it. And then, he found Bitcoin Twitter and got totally orange pilled. And once he was totally orange pilled, he totally orange pilled me. So and then there's kind of history, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Holy shit. I can't believe did you get the pictures back?
Yeah, we got the pictures back, because I lost my mind. I'm like hormonal. My kid's 2 weeks old. I'm like, you lost our fucking newborn pictures? Are you out of your mind? I don't care. I didn't care what it was. At that moment, I was like, our wedding pictures and our newborn baby pictures, he had not backed up, and, just a mistake. He was just a newbie.
I can't believe they actually, you send them the Bitcoin or whatnot, whatever amount in Satoshis it is, and they actually send the pictures back though, or release or give you, access to your pictures back, which is what amazes me.
Right. I don't really know
honor and code here.
Right. I don't really know. Like, I don't know the details of it. All I know is I was like, you take care of this.
Sure.
When I walk back in here, I want our pictures. And so I don't really, I'd have to ask him like the details of it, because I didn't, I really didn't understand it back then. I'm like, what are you talking about? It's like I didn't even understand the idea of it. It took me forever to wrap my mind around what it was.
Right.
So,
and what was that journey like, wrapping your mind around what it was, and what things spoke to you?
Well, at first it was really annoying, because it's all you would talk about. And if anyone is out there in a relationship with a Bitcoiner and you don't understand it, it's the worst fucking thing ever. Like, it is the most obnoxious thing. So he was in IT. He worked for Hewlett Packard for 10 years. He was in but he was in sales. He was a sales guy for big data centers. And I worked for Hewlett Packard for a little bit. So, technically I'm not super technical, but, I could keep up with what was happening, what was understanding. But for him to explain to me like how the blockchain worked and everything, it took me like a few years, and it was just me listening to him talk constantly. So my journey came from fuck the state. Like,
right.
I came from like a different angle. Like, I had like a complete ego death. I went through like a really big, deep, dark depression and went like through it. I went through a bunch of health issues. And when I went through it, it's just, when you wake up, you see everything. It's like, you can't unsee it. And once you see that, and then me and Joe's, we were parallel. Like, I'm like, fuck the state. And he's like, fuck the state. But look, I found this solution. And so when he got me on the same page as him technically, and I understood what it meant, it's freedom, and you can't unsee the light. So it was like, it took me, we were on parallel roads, but it took me a while to once I wrapped my mind around it and understood it, because I'm not a technical person. But once I understood the technology, that's when things started to click for me. Sure. So that took me probably took me 4 solid years, honestly.
That makes sense. I think it takes most of us at least that long. Where do you, have you always been an artist?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah. Have you always been an artist, and has your art changed with Bitcoin, or is it more or less, Bitcoin has just been embedded into your art?
No, it has absolutely changed with Bitcoin. I've always been an artist. I was like an art minor in school, and just a traditional like watercolor or acrylics, or, I love being creative and crafty, and I love painting. It was just like, I think a year ago, Mother's Day. I haven't even been a digital artist for a year. Joe bought me an iPad Pro for Mother's Day, and he's like, look, you could do some art on this. And so I just started like messing around with it and memeing, and super amateur, trying to figure it out. And then I just got into memeing because it was so fun and easy. He's all big on like, we're memeing Bitcoin to the moon. So he's like, you're fucking changing the world one meme at a time. And he's like, pumping behind me, wanting me to do memes constantly. So it really, I went from, my mom hates it. Oh my God. My mom's like super traditional and wants me to do like traditional oil paintings of landscapes all day. And here I am drawing pictures of like, girls with titties
Right.
and lasers coming off their titties. So yeah, it's totally new. This is like totally a new thing for me, but it's fun and I love it. And it does make sense. I mean, memes are the future. So
Sure. In terms of the toxicity and the trolling, I feel you really capture the zeitgeist of what I'm going to say is maybe the other side of the coin right now. So there's, maybe the mainstream narrative, and I think sort of the other narratives. And I think you really capture well sort of the feeling of maybe those other narratives. And,
yes.
and what do you think it is about trolling or being toxic? And do you think there's enough toxicity right now?
Okay. So the other side of the coin, I like how you put that, because I was like such a basic bitch, like before I found Bitcoin and before I had like, an ego death and this like what I call like my little mini awakening or however you want to phrase it.
Sure.
I was, total, like was like shopping addict. I was, had a huge social life. I was in a sorority. I was raised super traditionally. I was like basic bitch maximalist, right? So this is like a complete flip for me, like to be on the other side of this. And it's shocking to people that like when I am toxic to like normies, right? Like
Right.
on Facebook, people, because nobody hears it. I think, okay, so to answer one of your questions, I think that there's not enough toxicity but it's just a product of this whole like cancel culture bullshit that's happening. So everyone's just scared to be honest and scared to say their feelings because, like I have like, I kind of have like a fuck you status, I don't like have a job at a corporation that I have to watch my reputation about. I'm a stay-at-home mom. My husband works for Bitcoin magazine. And so it's like, encouraged to be toxic. So I have this status where I have this ability to be able to speak my mind openly and not be canceled. Like who the fuck's going to cancel me? My friends, but my friends that are friends with me know me well enough to know that have good intentions and I'm not ever, just rude to be rude. But I think that it's just a product of fiat, like fiat feeds this fucking cancel culture and then everyone is just scared to say anything. So I am this unicorn that is like, oh my God, look at this logic and knowledge, just like anyone on Bitcoin Twitter is. So no, absolutely not. That's why everyone fucking cries about how mean and scary and harsh, maximalists are on Twitter, because no one's used to the truth and everyone's so used to tiptoeing around everything to be politically correct that no, it just doesn't exist anymore. So I think some people think it's refreshing. Like me, I thrive off of the maximalists that are toxic as fuck because I'm like, this is so refreshing, especially now. I'm just so sick of hearing everyone just spit bullshit from talking heads on the TV, like look into what's happening and like speak truth. So no, it's nowhere. It's literally nowhere. No one speaks the truth. And I have people like you, okay, like you and me, we have these Facebook accounts, right? So I started shit posting on Facebook and people know I'll get like 5 likes on I'll, like a really toxic post about like, I don't know, COVID or some mask bullshit or whatever. And then I'll get a flood of people in my inbox. I'll get like 10 messages from people I know in my inbox, like, oh my God, yes. Or they'll send me links to shit or like, yeah, I feel the same way. I'm like, or I can't believe you just said that on there. And I'm like, what in the hell is going on? All these people feel the same way. They don't know it because no one's saying anything. And they're all messaging me because I'm the only one who's saying something. So it's so messed up. I believe in like a silent majority of people that know how fucked up the world is, but no one's saying anything. They're just sitting there, just scratching their asses not doing anything about it. So I messaged everyone back. I'm like, why don't you just comment that on my photo? Like, stop messaging me. You're annoying.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I'm kind of curious. So maybe not the person who's come across your tweets or your Facebook status or that sort of message, but maybe, someone who is similar to your former self, who's basic, but
Yeah,
hasn't come across any messaging yet. Do you have any empathy for that person who might go on that journey?
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, you don't know what you don't know. But that's why being toxic is so important. In the right kind of toxic. I wrote this tweet thread once about being like the right kind of toxic. Like be, and the basis of it was be toxic towards the darkness. Be toxic towards the people that are keeping everyone so suppressed. Say things that people wonder, like, wait, what is she talking about? Why are they saying that? Don't say things just to be rude, to be rude. And that's a big difference. And if someone comes in, really what's happening is maximalists on Twitter are being, quote, toxic. And really they're just holding people accountable, and people are just titty babies and getting their fucking feelings because, someone hurt their feelings on what they said. But there's a difference between holding someone accountable and being honest and toxic, and then just bullying someone just to be rude. So yeah, absolutely. If like my friends will say something, and I'll be about, like, say, like masks or something.
Mhm.
And I'm like, but what are you talking about? Like, there's nothing out. There's all these studies saying that they don't work. Like, like a basic, the CDC is like, they don't work. Right. And my friends will just be like, what? And I'm like, well, you just don't even look into it, and so you have to be patient to a certain extent. You have to, it's a fine line that you're walking. So yeah, absolutely. But then again, like, I was always questioning, and to, like, not see anything that's happening in 2020, you have to be like actively fucking avoiding it. Like, that's a big difference. So I guess it matters what you're talking about, but yes, to a certain extent, I have empathy for all these dumb bitches walking around shopping because they're just so worried about, like, image and doing things the right way and having their house and having the right car and having their kids dressed the same way. Because I lived that and I had that pressure, and I was there, and I have lost friends because I'm not like that anymore. I don't live in the neighborhoods that everyone lives in because I, didn't want to do that, or I wanted, a house in a different side of town, or so. Yeah, I have empathy, but also I think it's just laziness. So I think it's just a fine line between someone that's just never been exposed to anything and it just has so much pressure on them versus someone just being lazy and not giving a shit like what the fuck their money is.
Right. Do you think, I want, forget about voting with your feet and where the choices you can make personally, but in the greater scheme of things, do you think times are different today than before? I mean, parents and people have always been basic, and a lot of people have always ignored a lot of issues. States have always seized power, and state's going to be a state. But do you think things are getting worse on a certain scale, and do you think that on a greater scale, aside from voting with your feet, that we can even make a change?
You mean like ignorance wise, like getting worse?
Yeah, I guess. Well, people's reaction might be the same. I'm wondering if people are still just being ignorant or naive to the situation. That's always been the case. I don't know if they're getting more ignorant. But I don't know if people have always been in tune.
Yeah.
And I wonder, is the state getting, exponentially worse, or is the state, just being normal and
Yeah.
things
Like
aren't
doing what they
great, doing
right,
what they
right.
do, and the scale is really just feels worse maybe to us because we think about these issues and we want to make change and we want to help create awareness,
Right.
but maybe people have always existed like us, and we're just like bringing sand to the beach.
No, I think everything's worse. I think I think the state is where, I mean, the state's always been fucked up, right? I mean, like, who in their right mind thinks that the 2020 election was the first rigged election ever? Like, let's be fucking honest, right? Like, so shit like that. I mean, since like, I don't know, the 19 like 40s, I guess. This is really when the state, started like meddling and shit. So yes, but I think it is getting worse. I think like ever since Obama made it fucking legal to just propagandize everybody, I mean, the media is just like a fucking retard child on the loose. You know what I mean? Like no one's putting them in check. There's no, they can just say whatever they want. So, and I had actually a really genuine conversation with my boomer basic mom, right?
Mm-hmm.
She's like, Clancy, when I was growing up, when you watch the news, of course there was bullshit on the news and all that. But she said, but you watch the news and they reported information. Like this is what happened, and of course there was like, false information given occasionally or whatever.
Sure.
But she was like, now it's all based on like opinions and politics is woven in it. And politics has just been woven into everything. And it's just a product of shit money. And she's like, it's so hard for me because I'm like, Mom, that's on the news. You can't listen to what they're saying. Don't watch the news. And it's so hard for her because her whole life, that's where you get your information from. So there's this like disconnect with boomers because they're so confused because everything is, the news reports the news, but that's not what happens anymore. Right. So like the news is getting worse. The media is getting worse. And then of course, like social media, the internet has just fucking amplified everything. The state is getting worse. The propaganda is getting worse. The money is just being printed worse. And then that causes, all this like woke leftist cancel culture. So that being amplified makes everyone be fucking pussies and not say anything about their opinions ever because people can't be, it's cyclical. Like people are just so scared to be canceled. So I think it's just a product of fiat and everything is just getting so much worse that there's a tipping point, and if you don't see it coming soon, like you're in for a rude awakening. So I think it's just a trickle effect of like all of these things getting worse. And so I think, yeah, there's always been basic people out there, but now it's so, frowned upon to speak up like that. You just, like my mom's super traditional and she hates that I speak my mind and I'm vocal about all this stuff. Because it's really hard for her because you shut your mouth and you just do what you're told. And I'm like, fuck that. I'm not leaving the world for my children the way boomers left the world for us. So yeah, it's just all getting way worse and we have to do something about it.
Yeah. Well, I think we should turn to a little bit of Bitcoin. And I'm kind of curious some of your opinions there and your takes on maybe what Bitcoin's going to do, not for the individual, over the next 5 or 10 years. Do you think Bitcoin is going to change the world in some regards over 5, 10, 20 years for maybe people who aren't aware of Bitcoin right now?
Yeah, absolutely. The same, Joe hates when I use this word, ripple effect, but I'm not letting ripple ruin ripple effect because it's powerful. Yeah, the same ripple effect that happens with like fiat money that has given us like the product of all this bullshit culture that we're in now, it's going to be the opposite for Bitcoin. Bitcoin, it's if you get past trying to understand, wrap your hand around like the blockchain technology and how it works and security and all that. If you step back and look at it and look at the bigger picture, it holds everyone accountable. And I don't ever think anyone in history has ever had to be held accountable because of something like this. And I was on a Clubhouse the other day and a guy was asking, he was kind of a newbie and he was asking about, like how do we get past people saying, it's too late and they're too late to get in Bitcoin. All these whales are already in. It's too late. It's the same thing. They're just going to be poor like it always is. And I was trying to explain to him that like the fiat mindset is so hard to get out of. But once you understand like what Bitcoin is, and it's so much more, it's an ideology rather than just like a currency, right? You have to reframe your mind around like what money is and what it does for the world. And once And I'm like, yeah, like rich people are rich. And yeah, their stack's going to be bigger than yours. But with fiat, like the rich stay rich and get richer, and the poor stay poor, if anything, get poorer. But with Bitcoin, that's not going to happen. Like it holds everyone accountable. So it holds you accountable, and your mindset has to switch from this like constant motion of being suppressed by something. And once it's hard for people to shift their minds out of he's trying to understand it in the sense of like money, but it's not money. It's like a revolution. It's a change in the world, and the change in the way people think, and a change in the way that the economy works, but people's everyday lives. Like people are going to be able to, I think it's going to shift culture, because people are going to be able to focus on what they love. And also they're going to wake up, because there's a lot of people I know that, like I know women that have 4 kids and a job and a husband and a house to take care of. And, like they don't make a bunch of money, and they literally don't have time to think about how fucked up the world is, much less like all this mask bullshit and this COVID. Like people are so tired, and they're working so hard, they're just slaves to the dollar. And so like think about if that shifts, if you can actually save money and have real money, hard money in your bank account, and you can actually look up and breathe and think about the world and watch what's happening around you. And that's exactly what the state doesn't want to happen, but that's exactly what's going to happen. It's only a matter of time. Like they can't fucking stop the signal.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. And it was really interesting. I loved your piece in Bitcoin Magazine about the Walmart, the inevitability of the allocation to Bitcoin. I don't know if that's soon or far off, but can you walk us a little bit through your thinking there? And I think that's, I think it just kind of shows that for me, the underlying subtext was kind of getting at what I hope is that aha moment for a lot of Americans.
And that piece was, of course, not based off of fact. It was a total like what if, playful, like, but also like, realistically possible.
Yep.
Idea of what could happen if, a large corporation adopts Bitcoin or adopts the Bitcoin standard. So basically I just talked about like, I can't remember how big the Walmart company, $154 billion company. It's just something crazy like that, right?
Yep.
And people think, Walmart, it's like a grocery store, but it's so much, they're in, like 20 plus countries, and their online presence is huge. And so I just talked about how effect of them not only holding Bitcoin reserves, but then also them seeing the benefit of it. And what's interesting is when I published that, or when Bitcoin Magazine, it was in Bitcoin Magazine, they published it. The pushback I got was when I said, because I was just saying, they're going to adopt it, and then they're going to start soon people are going to start saying, pay me in Bitcoin. And I got so much pushback on people saying, why the hell would a company pay people in Bitcoin? And I had this mindset like, all right, well, if a corporation buys in Bitcoin right now, and they grow, say, I don't know, their stack grows 250% in a year, then they're literally paying people at a discount. Their bags are so big that people are requesting to be paid in Bitcoin. Why wouldn't they offer it? Because they are literally paying them, however much percentage their bags have gone up less in Bitcoin. There's things that are going to unfold that we can't even like imagine yet, because it hasn't happened. And I mean, there's a million different scenarios that could happen. But then I started talking about, if they start doing it, and if you walk in Walmart and Walmart has a, like you can pay in Bitcoin and get paid in Bitcoin, what would that do? That's Walmart is essentially like middle class America, right?
Right.
So, I mean, that's ultimate exposure, and for Americans at least, and
Yeah.
because all these, all these small countries are benefiting from using Bitcoin, but people in America, they don't fucking pay attention. They don't know what's happening and the economies around the world. If you don't like actively seek out world news and you're American, you are a fucking dumbass when it comes to global awareness, right? I mean, like, it's not their fault. We just we're never exposed to it, and if you don't seek it out, the government doesn't want you to know what's happening around the world, because Americans number one, and we don't need it. It doesn't matter. We're the best country in the world. So if you're just a dumbass when it comes to anything else. But once you see, these are real people, like, like what Strike's doing. I mean, they are like feet on the streets in all these small countries, showing people how to transact in Bitcoin, not using banks, not using, having to go through regulations. But people in America, they don't really have to worry about that shit. So the exposure fact is different. And it's kind of scary because it's like America could be the last to adopt, honestly, because they're so like clueless about what's actually happening in the world.
Sure. What I found really interesting about it is just that the notion that what's happening in corporate America right now with any sort of allocation of Bitcoin just is not going to, seep into middle America. And, I kind of want your take on how different America is from state to state and whether we are becoming more or less different over time going forward.
Okay. So how do you mean? Like,
well, right now, I mean, it seems like I feel like in one regard, we're going more the same, that we're just having this incredible ongoing federal or national conversation. It seems like that's endless, whether we partake in it or not, or you or I do.
Yeah.
It seems like it's an ongoing national conversation that I don't remember having endlessly before.
Right.
In one
Right.
regard,
Like, yeah.
we're kind of becoming one thing or one conversation and one way. And yet I think, you go from state to state and people are incredibly different. And even within a state, people are very different between the cities and the suburbs and the rural areas. So, yeah.
So it's interesting. It sucks because like all this, this conversation goes back to 2020 every time, just because shifted everything, right? Like our world will never be the same. We will never, I hear people talking about, we just want to go back to normal, everything, I just want to go back to the way things were. And I'm just like, you're out of your fucking mind if you think we are ever going back to any sense of, of normalcy.
Right.
So I think that I'm from Arkansas, I'm from the South, right? But our state is super blue and it's super odd. It's so odd, because everywhere you go, we are thankful that we're in the South just because we tend to be more Republican states. But it's interesting that you say that, because even when we went to Austin a few weeks ago for a Guns and Bitcoin conference, Austin was like, it was like California, because, because of everything that's happening, the influx of people from California have pushed so far, so much into Texas. Everyone's left. And a bunch of people have gone to Texas. And Austin has always been super liberal, but it was just like a whole different world. So I see what you're saying. I mean, I feel like if we don't do something about it, what you're saying is going to happen. And we are all going to turn. So like what you are saying, how you feel like that's happening, I feel like it hasn't quite happened yet, but we are on the cusp of it happening. And if we don't do something about it and push back or wake up, that's going to happen. And eventually everyone's just going to be fucking zombies. So
yeah, I don't even think it's a red or blue thing. I think the pendulum will continue to swing back violently as a tool against the state from one party to the other, so that they can create a lot of fear on one side and then repercussions and consequences when the pendulum swings back politically and so on. I think we're in for another 6 to 8 more years of turmoil, but it just seems to be that it's going to be 24/7 for the next 6 to 8 years on a national dialogue, rather than just events playing out. And And yeah, and I'm not sure what happens at the state level, and whether some people talk about the union not surviving, and I've never really had to think about that in my lifetime before.
I think I think it's totally plausible. I think that they're the only end to this. And this is sad because, you know, we all like meme about how we're watching we're watching the world burn, and maximalists are just like enjoying the ride because, we have Bitcoin. But I think there's no um, good end to it. I think it has to crash and burn to I think it's going to crash and burn. I think the only way to get out of it is to crash and burn. I mean, what other way out do you see other than it? Because we've just gone so far off the rails that I don't know how you could I don't know how you could go backwards and undo the damage that has been done.
Right.
Hopefully not undo the damage that's been done on the state's part on waking people up. Hopefully that continues. But what's happening now, it doesn't look, like there's still momentum and it's not stopping. So I don't see any way of everyone just waking up one day and, moving backwards. Everything's getting worse. Yeah. And you're right about the politics. I mean, it doesn't matter who the fuck the president is. We're still going to be bombing people, that we're still going to be printing money,
Right.
It's just like putting makeup on a pig, you know what I mean? It's just, it doesn't matter who it is. The same shit's going to keep happening until it crashes and burns.
But it is interesting. I do think that some of the areas that some places will change, I think, over the next few years, like maybe Austin or Miami. And I think there will be, and I do have a lot of optimism just from Bitcoin alone for humanity. And therefore, I'm hoping, this is more of a gradually than suddenly with, things continue as they are. And hopefully that's sort of like this boiling the frog thing for another 8 years. And then somehow Bitcoin not is just financially bigger, but more culturally, there's a huge cultural awakening.
But then what? Like, what do you mean? How does something like this boil for 8 years and not crash and burn? You know what I'm saying?
Well,
how does that, and then how does it get better?
Well, I think that there's, and I hate to go the nationalist route because I don't really believe in nationalism as a like a metaphysical existential thing. But I think, in years 5 through 8, if the United States government adopts a Bitcoin standard, you can have things go from gradually then suddenly better. So it's gradually getting worse, and then it suddenly gets better from a nationalistic, all boats rise with the tide kind of thing, rather than the whole economy crashes and a new economy that's better is reborn.
Right.
I'm hoping more for scenario A. I'm not a prognosticator or a futurist.
Right.
But it's interesting. I mean, I love conspiracy theories. I think we've become conspiracy scientists.
Oh, definitely.
The thing for me, though, is I've never really, and when I say found truth, one of the things I was getting at earlier in the conversation is that you can have a narrative that is more accepted by the majority, or we want to call it mainstream narrative, whatever it is, or the general narrative. And it was an interesting conversation on Twitter today, where the opposing narratives doesn't necessarily, if you don't believe in the mainstream narrative, or you question the mainstream narrative, maybe you don't know if you believe in it or don't, and whatever narrative we're talking about it doesn't mean just because you question it that the other narrative is true, or narratives, or that you know which one is true.
Yeah.
And that's where with Bitcoin, before Bitcoin, I never found truth. You don't have a lot of historical truth verification or political verification machines. So in Bitcoin, I've found something that I could, what maybe appeared to be something that could be a scam or a conspiracy at first. And I found it to be true. And it kind of bends the world true truth for me. And that's why, and I wonder for you, has there been anything pre-Bitcoin that you still kind of one particular or many conspiracies that really kind of you still kind of chasing, or have they all been thrown away and there are new things that interest you now, or do they just come and go and they're kind of like what's interesting at the moment?
Oh man, well, I guess it matters how far down that rabbit hole you want to go, because I can go all the way. But I think the most relevant one is just been, I don't know how you can call some of these things conspiracies anymore. I mean, what is the definition of a conspiracy when you have facts? How are you going to call something a conspiracy when there's just facts and evidence to back up something consistently? And so just because, the mainstream narrative calls it a conspiracy, normies just keep calling it a conspiracy. So anything to do with the government is just time and time again, there's just the facts are out there. And I tell people all the time, if you want to find something out, all you have to do is look. It's literally in front of you. There's a little something called the internet, and all you have to do is look. You have to, that's what, again, like I said, you have to actively be trying to not look, to not see some of these things. So, I mean, I don't know how far you want to go into it, but just anything that has to do with control and, opposition to the truth is considered is considered conspiracy theory, which, I just don't know how much more everything that happens. I just, like everyone on Twitter, we're like, how is this happening? How are people still, people just, it's an ego thing. They're just going to die on their hills. It doesn't matter how much truth you put in front of people. They are just going to have to die on this hill because their egos are hurt so bad by something being true, or maybe it messes with their worldview. I don't know, but it's hard. It's just really hard and laughable to me that people can still consider, all of these things conspiracies. Now, if you're going to go down like the damn alien rabbit hole, that's different, right? That's it gets real touchy, and people get all, you'll be having real level-headed conversations with people, and you bring that shit up and they're just done. Like they can't handle it, or they're just like, that's bullshit. Nope, I'm done. Not going to talk about it. So when you go down that way, it becomes more, less money and more like power and spiritual warfare. And that's where people start to get uncomfortable. So, which that is actually, to me, those kind of conspiracy theories are the ones that I keep coming back to every time. It's like, like Bill Gates, right? I mean, the man has more money than God. What else could he need? What the fuck is his problem that he has to just keep fucking with people constantly, right? Like, what is it? And you have to stop and ask yourself, like, what is it? And they just announced today, like, I got on Twitter today, him and Melinda are getting a divorce, right?
Right.
And I was just thinking and talking to Joe about, like, this is just proof that money does not mean prosperity, right? Like, money and power do not bring you prosperity. And it's so much more than that and bigger than that. Like, this is a battle ultimately between like dark and light. And, and if you start to go down that, and you really start to listen and step back and listen to everything and really look at it with a expanded perspective, everything goes back to that, because all these people that are in power, all these cantillionaires that are just they just get, it's not money that they want. It's something else. Like, there's something else more to it. And that's like, it's scary when you start to think about that and you start to look at the facts. And it's really fucking scary to people to think about, like, like all these Satanists and all these theories about people eating babies and shit. You know what I mean? Like, it's scary, but really that ultimately that's what it comes down to, because money is not what they need more of. So what else is it?
Right. But aren't those long-standing eternal issues? Or I'm not saying aren't those, meaning I'm saying in terms of if this is what you believe in, is this a new thing? in terms of
Yeah.
yeah, okay. And then my question here then in terms of conspiracy theories, of the other side of the coin is, someone's control. If a narrative is being controlled, is it there's separate narratives that are just certain entities want to control, or is there like more of a singular entity trying to control all these narratives?
Okay, so you're asking my opinion on this. Are you sure?
Sure.
I'm just kidding. Okay. Well, okay, here we go. Okay, so I believe in what I listen, I'm a podcast freak, okay? I read everything. I do laundry and listen, and I will plow through some podcasts, right? Like I've gone to the edge of the flat earth on podcasts, right? And back. So I've just filled my mind with so much bullshit, but also so much knowledge, right? And you just got to take everything with a grain of salt. But when it comes down to it, I mean, there's too much connection between all these like major world leaders, right? I mean, like they're all like just like take the election. That's just a really basic, easy example to use. Like they're all in cahoots together. They're all in it together. They're all helping each other out. They're all cheating each other. It's to think that everything is every like, and especially 2020. How can the world coordinate such a fucked up plan, right?
Yeah.
And it just be and it's like the weirdest thing. It's like everyone's hypnotized. Everyone is just like accepting this and all these, it's all trickling down from the top though. Everyone's saying the same narratives and trickling out the same narratives and saying the same things to the people. So it's got to be, I mean, if you use logic and look at it, conspiracy theories aside, if you use logic and facts, it has to be bigger than just like individual countries all just happen to feel the same way about fake facts. It just has to be something bigger. So my belief is that it's absolutely, like I don't know if it's a group of people. I don't know if it's like, you can go down the societies
Sure.
rabbit hole, all that. But I absolutely think that it's way bigger than just like our government and their government, or you know what I mean? It's so much bigger, and it absolutely has to be a group of people that is larger than just like a group of nations.
Yeah, my mind is bending.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's all places that I've gone before in my thinking, but I don't usually. Yeah, it's very interesting stuff.
Oh, and it's scary. I mean, it's scary to go there. I mean, not for me, at least.
No, I don't think it's scary to
It's
go there. I think it's in today's current environment. It's just it's dangerous territory.
but it's also today's environment. It's literally the most logical conclusion.
Right.
Like they're doing it to themselves. They're fast forwarding hyper Bitcoinization. Like, thank you, government, for being the ultimate advertising for Bitcoin. Everything that they do is just pushing everyone to freedom. Like the more you suppress someone, the more they are going to crave freedom. And I'm an American. I'm in supposedly the freest country in the world, right? And I have never in my life felt so trapped inside of not only just like in my house and like I need to get out of here, but around the holidays I really started to feel a lot of suppression. Like I couldn't go anywhere without being exposed to it. Everyone talking about it. It's affecting my family. It's affected all my friends. Its tentacles have reached into every single part of my life. And it's really, and if it's doing that to me and I'm an American, imagine what it's doing to people in countries that aren't as free as ours. And like all these countries that are, these people getting beaten in the streets for wanting to walk their dogs outside. So it's overwhelming. And I don't see how, go ahead.
Yeah, I think on that front, I agree with you. We're not going back to normal. I don't think that exists. I think this temporary stuff is permanent. I think that I'd like to think that the Bitcoin renaissance will, like I said before, help us figure a way out through this. But I do see the next one this year. I think in some ways I'm waiting for the other foot to drop, and this year to be worse than last year in a lot of ways. And I don't know how that's going to play out, but
Well, next is going to be the environment. That's the
right,
next.
and energy, and yeah, and
Yeah.
that'll be the war against Bitcoin as well.
Oh, absolutely. Well, I don't know. I feel like recently the FUD has been squashed so hardcore that I'm like, what are these people going to come up with? I mean, I don't put anything past them because they're all, completely retarded. But like, the media is just they can take anything and run with it. But recently, like all that stuff came out, like the guy from CNN, some girl caught him on video talking about this is our next narrative. Got him drunk, and he's talking about our next narrative is the environment, and we are going to push fear that the world is ending. Like literally, what could be worse for you to fear than the world completely ending? So but also you have to look at like they're cap, they're maxing out on what else to try to scare us with. I mean, there's war and terrorism, but like, come on, if you still believe that we are in war over terrorism, you are out of your fucking mind. Like if you think that we have a presence in the Middle East because we are protecting our homeland from terrorists, you don't have the
right. So we still have the
idea.
war on drugs, though. We still have the war on terrorism. So I believe we're gonna have the war on germs for another 20 to 40 years.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's the way I'm kind of framing up the current environment. And and then the war on energy that you're getting at is I think part of the larger war against self enjoyment. So anything that you do that requires energy, quote unquote, is selfish.
Yes, but also Bitcoin fixes this.
Right, but the war is not going to be framed that way. The narrative will be against Bitcoin.
Right. So, but okay. So also like let's look at the exposure that Bitcoin's had so far. So let's say Bitcoin is held by 2 million people in the world. I mean, roughly, right? That's like 0.1 of the world population. And literally every day you turn on the TV. Well, Joe likes to troll me in the morning by turning on Squawk Box and just triggering me really early. So he turns it on, and they're always either flashing it on the screen, or they're going to bring it up somehow, or they're going to bring up some shit coin or something, right? And they're talking that, okay, that's the news, right? So every day there's more awareness. Every day something happens, and there's more exposure, and that's just one more person that's going to download, start stacking sats, start seeing the light, and as that exposure grows and grows and grows, like if you take Bitcoin out of the equation, I think what you're saying is, yes, we'll be like, I think we are on that track, right? But I think stay on that track on your war against energy or consumption or war against germs. But then, throw in the Bitcoin awareness. Like, how is that going to counteract that? Which way are we going to shift? When are we going to shift? So just like you were saying earlier, like you think like if we can gradually incorporate Bitcoin into our economy, maybe we won't crash and burn. So, it's like a fine line that you're walking with that too. And it's just so unpredictable, and I think just this is why it's so important for people to be toxic, because it might sound shitty sometimes, but even bad exposure is good exposure for Bitcoin, because the second it's, people hear it and they have to look into it and question it. Even the FUD, people are like, oh, Bitcoin's blowing the oceans or whatever the FUD of the day is about it killing the planet. People are hearing it and listening, but they're also paying attention, and it's exposure. It's just like any celebrity, right? Like any exposure is good exposure. So the quicker you can expose people to FUD, the quicker you can prove the FUD wrong and move on to the benefits, right? So exposure is exposure. No, and Bitcoin doesn't fucking care. It doesn't matter. Like, it's not going to stop. It's not going to, nothing people say about it, write about it, is going to stop it and or change anything about it. And it's ripple effect of freedom on people's minds and people's lives and jobs.
Yeah, I agree. I'm really hopeful that that comes faster than slower. I do think, and I'm really torn. The eternal optimist in me just wants to see it happen as fast as possible. The cynic in me thinks, I think the gradually then suddenly is that the suddenly is Bitcoin in terms of the cultural effect, and that we gradually just keep going and grinding through what we are now for a while longer. And institutional adoption, to me, in the beginning, doesn't necessarily translate into cultural adoption and renaissance yet, and that kind of optimism. But we'll see. I'm super excited. I want to find a reason to be optimisist.
Right. Okay. So speaking of being optimist as something like super dark and negative. Okay. So something, when you're asking me about conspiracy theories, I don't know if this is necessarily a conspiracy theory, but it's more spiritual. But something that keeps coming up in my mind a lot lately, and something that I've seen people talking about. Have you seen any threads of people talking about the mark of the beast and the rise of the digital currency and what that might lead to?
No.
So if you know anything about, Revelations in the Bible, it talks about the mark of the beast. I'm sure you've heard that before.
I've heard that. I'm not familiar with the full
right.
the fleshed out story here that we're getting into.
All right. So this is relevant, I swear. Okay. So what it translates to from the Bible is the it being on the mark of the beast being, I think the literal translation is like a picture on a coin is what I think the literal translation is to. And it talks about people knowingly getting the mark of the beast. And this mark of the beast, unless you have this, you can't like buy you can't buy anything, or you can't spend anything. You can't transact in any way. So it has everything to do with currency and everything to do with our monetary system. And it's a really interesting take on it, because what you see unfolding and how, the vaccine passports have come up, and people are like, oh no, it's not the vaccine passports, because you have to supposedly you have to knowingly get the mark of the beast. You have to know that it's from the darkness and you're getting it anyway. But I think it's really interesting that if you think about this in the way that the world may shift, and people and governments creating their own currency, their own digital currencies, and trying to get their people to use their digital currencies. I think it's a really interesting perspective, and I suggest people to look it up, because it's a really interesting way of seeing how things may unfold. Not necessarily the most positive way, but really interesting, because everything that it talks about, it seems to be unfolding. So I think what's going to happen is, after, Bitcoin does get tons of exposure and people do start adopting it, what governments might eventually do is just try to create their own digital currencies and force people to use theirs. So then that's going to be another battle that we're going to have to fight again. We're going to have to get over that hump, because it only makes sense that will be their last grasp of control. What else can they do if people start adopting Bitcoin besides regulating it and trying to force people to use their own currency? Yeah. So it's just a little knick-knack, a knowledge nugget for you.
Yeah, no, definitely. Definitely puts a different twist on things. I definitely think there's definitely a battle out there for, the soul of the people. And I think fiat is at the crutch of that battle, along with Bitcoin. And I think obviously Bitcoin's going to win. I just don't know, how that plays out in terms of, how that affects everybody, whether that's individuals can save themselves on the life raft, or the boat will be there for everybody and lift everybody up.
Yeah, I think it depends on where. I think it's going to have to depend on where you live and how your country tries to regulate it. which
Right.
is the sad part. Some people are trapped. They can't get out. Or, if all this vaccine passport shit happens, people are even more trapped. Or if, like it's just more control. So if something doesn't give, I think it's just going to get worse before it gets better.
Yeah, and I just don't think in that scenario, Bitcoin does a lot for you if you're physically kept within a certain geographical space.
Yeah, people get out now.
Yeah, but where do you go?
I know, right?
I think in that regards, if things go along those lines, it's going to be a stay and fight kind of thing.
Yeah, we got to go to the fucking moon to escape this.
And I wonder, are we in a cold civil war already?
Absolutely. I think we're in the beginning of it. Absolutely.
And what does that mean? How does that play out? What does a civil war look like in today's times?
I feel like it's already, right now it's just with information. We're in this information war right now.
Right.
Okay, so like leave Bitcoin Twitter, leave the echo chamber and take a
That sounds horrible.
Yeah, I know. Dip a toe into normie land, right? Just dip a toe. Go in there and just try to just challenge anyone's thought on any perspective, right? On a mainstream narrative perspective. And it just becomes a war of who can send links to what and where and whose sources and this information and it ends up just being this, it's just information overload. So now there's so much information, so much information for people to absorb, but also like so much more access for the government to insert false information. So now it's just a war of information. Like what is right? What is wrong? Who can you trust? Like, how do you verify something? Because then you find out like, oh, this person is, comes from this person. This person's in the umbrella company and this umbrella company is owned by the fucking Clinton Foundation. So it's like this war of information of between like you and the internet almost, if that makes sense. Like I can get an information war on anyone on Twitter, but like who is really winning this battle in the end?
Yeah, well, when I was on political Twitter before Bitcoin Twitter, I felt like a casualty of that war, and I don't think I ever want to fight a war like that again. I don't know. I don't know if it's incumbent and our responsibility to fight these information battles. I'm just not sure.
I think it goes back. I just think we have to rebuild the internet. I think we just have to do it.
Right. Well, that's where Bitcoin comes in Lightning and Start9 Labs and Sphinx Chat and these technologies that I hope will be the beginning of, I don't care if we call it Web 3.0, I'm not really a big fan of that, but just a decentralized communication channel or channels.
Yeah. Yeah. And speaking of my, like the truther community, okay, conspiracy theorists they now call themselves truthers because now they don't have conspiracy theories to talk about anymore because they've all been proven correct and unfolded.
Doesn't it have a negative connotation in some regards?
What, truthers?
Yeah. I mean, we're going down. I'm not familiar with the vernacular and what has, but I thought like in some regards in mainstream narrative, that would be a negative connotation. I guess maybe we should own the word.
Yeah, it sounds like you got a little programming going on there, said. No, I mean, of course anyone mainstream is going to think truthers are crazy and have a negative connotation because they're literally screaming "I told you so" to everyone. So like they've written books about things and they've literally unfolded in 2020 and 2021. But what's interesting about them is, the censorship issue has just gotten out of control too, right? So all of these guys who have podcasts and had this huge following have been like banned on YouTube. They're getting banned from Apple Podcasts, banned from Twitter, banned from fucking Facebook, of course, because that's just ultimate normie land. And so they're getting banned from everything. So all these guys I've listened to all, there's like, all the podcasters, they're all kind of in the group, kind of like Bitcoiners are. Everyone kind of like talks to each other, knows what's going on with each other. And so all of these guys have figured out like they're going to have to run their own servers. And they've literally started to rebuild their following and their channels and their content on their own servers. They've had to figure it out. And these aren't technical guys. It's easy to say that to a technical community of Bitcoiners, like, bro, like run your own server, like run your own node. But these guys are just, like normal people that are just being so censored, and they're fucking frustrated and fed up with it. And they are just, like using the internet again. The government unleashed the internet, and it's just a beast that's reared its head against them, because now we have all this access to information. So all these guys just started running their own servers, and they're spreading it. They're like spreading this knowledge, and it's gonna all, eventually trickle out from there. But these people are doing it. They're off. They're not on YouTube anymore. No one's watching YouTube that is wanting actual information. If you want to find information that's like not mainstream, you're not going to fucking find it on YouTube or from Googling it. If you still use Google and YouTube, you need to throw your phone in the fucking ocean, because you're not going to find any information on there that's correct. I mean, it's nonsense. So these guys, they've figured it out and they're doing it. And these are not technical people. So it's happening. Like, it's out there happening. It's just going to take time to, take effect. But it's definitely happening in a non-technical group of people. And it's beautiful to watch.
Yeah, I can't help but tip off on what you said about the internet has been turned against governments. I think that might be true on the individual basis. And I struggle with this, but I think at most levels, the internet has been turned against us as a large group, not you and I as individuals. But I think the internet has been a very powerful tool for the states against just the greater masses, us included in that, whether we individually notice it or not. I think that kind of makes me pessimistic. I just think that the internet, like you said, it's an information war. And even if you're fighting it, you're still subjected to it. I do think that, toxicity is great for art. It's something that I hadn't really seen until 2018 or 2019 in Bitcoin Twitter. And at first, it's something that, like, you might not agree. I think it's designed for you not to agree with it at first, or to make you angry at first, or to just be striking. And I think that a lot of great art comes from that, because it's not designed to just make you feel good or to appeal to your lowest common denominator, but to make you think. It's expressive. Yeah. And I think some of it even takes me a long time to come around and see what the artist is saying, or the artist's point of view, whether I agreed the whole time or never agree, or usually come around and do agree. But I think that's a sign of great art as well, because it makes you think. And I do think that you kind of have a handle on that on Twitter. And I think I see less and less of that on Twitter these days, especially in the bull market. And I think we still need sort of that. It's the immune system for Bitcoin, I believe.
Yes, it's the white blood cells of Bitcoin, is the memes and the toxic art. But I think that high time preference art has infiltrated society and is the fucking devil. I mean, it's sad, like, I think people don't even understand how to appreciate low time preference art. I mean, I'll have people in my family request me to do them a piece of art, and I'll get excited, okay, let's talk about it. What do you want to do? What are you thinking? What is it for? And, they'll like whip up a picture from Pinterest or the internet somewhere, social media, and it'll just be, like some black squiggles on a canvas, which is I'm not saying that's not beautiful. I mean, that's cool. And, if that's like the look you're going for, whatever, but it's just everywhere. And I even worked at a really high end design store where, we had, a lot of really wealthy clients that would come in, and you would design their house from the ceiling to the floor, from drapes and all, and the art. And we had, original art in there, and people would bring it. We had original artists coming and bringing in art. And it was just like, get some paint and splash it around, put some squiggles on it, and, $5,000 right there on a piece of art. And I'm not saying that those things can't be beautiful, but I just feel like there's a lost appreciation for low time and for low time preference art. But also, this is also a negative effect of the internet as well. I mean, you can look at anything, you can print anything, you can order anything, a print of anything. So it's the reared its ugly head goes both ways, right? Like, just like you were saying,
Yeah.
it's giving us information and access to everything. But in that, I think you lose appreciation for things that you wouldn't often see. Like, for instance, when I was in Chicago, for instance, my sister took me there for my 30th birthday, and we went to the art museum, and I was so excited to go in there. And I walked in, and I mean, I'm an artist, right? So I can appreciate fine art, and I love art history. I love all of it, right? But I also love modern art. I can appreciate all of it if it's, worth appreciating, of course. But when I don't know if you've ever seen like the Monets in person, but
That I could recall.
I'm sorry.
I maybe have, but not that I could recall.
They're okay. First of all, they're huge. I mean, floor to ceiling, wall to wall, they're huge. But you can stare at a Monet all day, every day on the internet and say, oh yeah, that's so water lily, it's beautiful. But seeing it in person is a different experience. I had like a breakdown when I saw it in person. Now I got super emotional because there's just something about it. There's something about someone creating something and putting their heart and soul into something, and the appreciation you have for it. And you can be anyone and walk in that museum, and you have to be dead to not feel it. So I think there's just this lost appreciation for beautiful things that take time and time preference art. And that is actually something I struggle with, like creating things digitally, because I'll spend a lot of time perfecting something and making it beautiful, when really like memeing is just about like cranking out art, making it funny, cool. The quality doesn't matter. So I struggle with it because I know there's a place for it and I have an appreciation for it. But also what I truly appreciate is, I think, what is a lost art of really low time preference art. And that's like my sweet spot right there.
Yeah. I'm also wondering, I agree with everything you said there. And I'm wondering, in a Bitcoin world, where would you live? So things are great and you could live anywhere, and there wouldn't be sort of any concerns about the government or anything. Where would you live?
I would probably live where I live right now, which is in Little Rock, Arkansas. I was born and raised there, and I've left. We moved to Texas and lived there for a little while, and I love Texas too. I really love it there. But I love Arkansas. It's perfect. It has every season perfectly. It is just big enough, just small enough. It's probably, I don't know, it's the most natural you can get in the South, I feel like. I mean, East Tennessee is beautiful too, but I feel like I would live exactly where I am. I'd probably buy a Citadel way out, but I'd be exactly where I am right now.
Do you think the South gets low time preference a little bit more innately than the North? And in that regard?
No, I think no matter where you are, you have shitty low time preference buildings. I mean, we went to Nashville recently, and Nashville, there's like this boom of these container buildings. It's actually really sad. I mean, Nashville is this beautiful city, and there's just this surge of buildings that are literally just like prefab containers, and they're just putting them up everywhere. And I don't mean to like shit on Nashville, because I think Nashville is wonderful and beautiful. I think it's everywhere. I think, but like in Little Rock too. I mean, we have.
But I meant in like a perfect world. So now even, I mean, like, meaning, so, in a better, on a Bitcoin standard. So now, you have a choice still, and yet in the South, I wonder, or is it just really you would stay where you're from, or there are specific qualities about it that, would even shine more in a Bitcoin world?
Okay. Yeah. I think, I'm from the South, so I'm biased, of course, but I think tradition is a big deal where we are. doing things traditionally seems to be lower time preference. Not that modern things can't be low time preference, but they just tend to not be, right? So, like, ideally, where I live, where I see myself living, I see myself building a citadel that takes 15 years to build, because we do it like out of fucking limestone, and have true craftsmanship, and have, like, carved stone, and doing things low time preference the right way. Just like, like, we have these old buildings that are hundreds of years old that are still standing in great shape, because they're not made out of fucking wood and metal and tin. So yeah, I think there's something to say about, like, being in the South and it being a little bit more traditional. I'm not saying that there's not traditional things in the North, but tradition seems to be more prevalent in the South, building wise at least.
Yeah, I hear you. There's more space, which has really grown to appeal to me lately. Maybe I'll move to the South one day. We'll see. I've enjoyed this conversation tremendously. I've been looking forward to it for a while. I did want to touch on one tweet you had about falling in love with Mr. Joe Rodgers. And
Okay.
when you did, he was an unemployed beer salesman. I'm gonna let you know that that's just unemployed and drinking a beer. I'm not sure what he told you about the salesman part about that.
No, he was.
I'm an unemployed NBA player right now.
Oh, hell yes. He was a beer salesman, and then he was laid off.
Sure.
From being a beer salesman.
I hear
you.
So,
yeah, that's funny. Actually, funny story. But yeah, so everyone, that I didn't marry Joe for his sats, right? So I was in this before the sats existed.
Fair enough.
Yeah, he was a beautiful unemployed salesman who hated the fucking state, and I fell in love with him.
Yeah, well, we talked to Joe episode, I think it was like 24, about 3D printing, guns, and Bitcoin.
Yes.
Yep, and definitely check that out. And I can't tell you how much I've enjoyed our conversation. I'll leave the mic to you for any parting words, and definitely let people where they can find you and buy your art.
Yeah, I don't really have like an art web page set up yet, but follow me on Twitter, anonymous BTB. If I do get anything set up, it'll be linked to my page. I would say just stack sats and stay fucking humble. I feel like people are coming out of the woodworks, and stay humble, stack sats. That's about all I have to say. Stay fucking humble. Don't be a bitch.
Word. Thank you so much, Clancy.
Thanks, Ed. Yeah, it's been so good talking to you. Thank you for having me.
Clancy Rodgers on Conspiracy Scientists, The Mark of the Beast, Basic Bitches, and how Bitcoin will hold everyone accountable right here on the Bitcoin Matrix podcast. And thank you for listening. If you dig the chats, make sure to subscribe, share, and learn. I have so many amazing guests lined up for the rest of the summer that you won't want to miss, no matter how hot it gets. Stack sats and stay humble. This is said. Peace.